Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are out there. It's time for another episode of Train Talk. This is the SoundTraxx blog, or the SoundTraxx podcast. Sorry, wrong word. But this is the SoundTraxx podcast from Train Talk from Milepost 141. I'll get my wheels under me here in just a second. Apparently, first day of my new mouth, so it's taking a little time to get ready to talk to a camera. So, a lot of stuff going on. There's been, I can tell you this, with everything that's going on in the world, I can tell you that we've actually been doing really well. It's been busy. A lot of you out there are still working with your models. You're upgrading older models. For example, I've got some older ones here in front of me. We're going to discuss them a little bit. So that's a good sign. It tells us the hobby is strong. It's people are actually still looking at working on things, and we've actually seen a lot of response to our first episode of the Rehab My Loco, where I took an SD40. We talked about it last podcast. It's been on there. So that's been really exciting. So you should be watching for episode 2 coming soon. As of this recording, I've got all the parts together, so I got to start videotaping, putting the parts together on the model, showing you how to add some detail, things like that. So really excited. Can't wait for that to happen. Those will be coming very, very soon. As of course you may notice, I'm here by myself again, and so over the last few weeks I've been handling most of the support calls and emails that you guys have all been sending in. So great, I'm glad to be able to help you out. But one of the common things that keeps coming up, and I want to mention a few things. Number one, we've had a few people where they'll ask a question, how do I do XYZ, whatever it is. And if they would use the user's guide, it actually is explained in full detail, step by step. So I encourage you guys to try using the user's guide to start with. There's a lot of great information, and I especially encourage you to start with Chapter 1. Chapter 1 talks about what all the sounds are that you're hearing, what the noises are, how they're made in the real world. For example, on a steam locomotive, which I don't have in front of me, do you know what a snifter valve is? A lot of people don't, but if they hear this sound and they don't know what it is, how can you appreciate what it is, and second of all, make any adjustments to the performance of that? What is, like for example, the air compressor. Do you know that our brake sounds are interactive with the air compressors? Because when you're using the brakes, that tends to mean that you're using the air more from your locomotive, and so therefore it triggers the air compressor to run more often, kind of like more of like what you would see in the real world. One of the things I wanted to point out with this particular, with our decoders, is they're more of a simulation of a locomotive than a noisemaker. Anybody can make a decoder that plays noise and just rattles off sounds all day long. But we try to make that a little bit more enjoyable for you because our sounds are interactive based on how you're using the decoder. So that way it gives you a more interactive feel so that you actually feel like you're running the real locomotive and not just playing noises through a simulator keyboard or whatever. Because this is fun and enjoying running the train. We want to, presumably this is what we're interested in, right? And so we want to make sure our trains run and sound as prototypical as we can. And that's why you come to SoundTraxx, is because we've built a lot of that in. And so by starting with Chapter 1, you can get just the base foundation knowledge of what we've built into the decoder, all the different sounds, what you're hearing, and so forth. And when you understand that and you hear certain sounds as you're running your train, you can say, that was XYZ, fill in the blank. Or you can understand what it is. Or the other side of that is you could say, that sounds a little loud. I want to adjust it. But if you don't know what the sound is, how are you going to be able to adjust it? So instead of just learning it and adjusting it, you may just live with it, which is one of the things that, for lack of a better term, kind of makes me sad a little bit, because you don't have to live with it with SoundTraxx decoders. There's so much customizability and so much adjustability built into these decoders that you can make them basically do just about whatever you want. Let's say, for example, one of the sounds I think is too loud is the cab door. So when fireman Ed in the diesel case, for example, gets out of his cab and goes to work on the locomotive, you hear this cab door open and slam. That seems a little loud to me, so I go in and make the adjustment so that volume is down a little bit more what I think it should be, which is honestly closer to like 15 or 20 out of 255 versus I believe the default is somewhere around 50 or 60. So it's still pretty loud. And especially if your locomotive hasn't fired up yet and it's just sitting here idle, that's one of the things that can be very pronounced, and you can hear it across the room. And that's one of the things that I try not to do, is to hear all the sounds all the way across the room. So, but the user's guide has so much information in there for you to use, so that way you can get the most out of your decoder to fit your desires. You may like everything cranked up. You know what? Great. That's awesome, because you can do that with SoundTraxx products. Every sound effect has its own volume control, including, but not limited to, Fireman Ed's toilet flush. Yes, you can adjust the volume of Fireman Ed's toilet flush. No longer are you subject to a pre-mixed sound of background sounds at one volume that are pre-mixed by the manufacturer. You have that control with SoundTraxx products, and that's what makes us and our decoders so much better than everything else out there, because it gives you the customizability. But then you have a master volume on top of that, so you can go in and mix your sound volumes up and down how you like. Then you can mix the overall volume of everything up and down. We even have a secondary audio mixer that allows you to go in and adjust a second set of volumes, and that can be used for various things. For example, you can use that for club setting versus a home setting. So when you're in a club, there's so much noise going on, a lot of ambient stuff going on, that maybe kind of drowns out the locomotive, so you may want to turn them up a little bit. But then at home, where you don't have all that competing noise, you have a small little, let's say, desktop or tabletop or shelf layout, where now those club's volume settings are pretty loud. So you can actually turn those down with the use of a function button to enable the alternate mixer. Other options you can use that for is, like, say, for example, we've done a couple of videos where in one case you can have the horn blow on one end of a paired set when you're going in one direction, and then when you go the other direction, the secondary volume mutes the horn and bell on the lead unit, on what was the lead unit, and now turns it on what is now the lead unit. We've also done a video where I use the alternate volume mixer to tow dead units. So in the real world, if you're pulling a locomotive that may not be powered up or is going for service, or if you just need a power transfer, surely you guys have seen where you'll see a string of, say, 25 or 30 locomotives together where only 4 or 5 of them are actually powered or running, which is dragging the others, basically glorified boxcars. And you can do that using the alternate mixer, in which case all the sounds that would be operating when the locomotive is running are muted, except things like the brake squeal and the clickety clacks. So you get those type of things that you can do with your locomotive. So it gives you that ability to add more realism. But all of this isn't necessarily explicitly mentioned in the user's guide. The user's guide explains how to do things. And so when you come up with creative ideas on what you want to do, check the user's guide and see if there's a way to do it. You know, and I'm not saying we won't help you. We obviously want to help you. So you can contact us anytime at support@soundtraxx.com. But that manual, I know most of us are guys. We don't like to read manuals. But the manual is filled with a lot of information. So if you go to SoundTraxx.com and go to support and scroll down where you'll see documentation, and then that'll pull up a list where you can see manuals and a lot of other things such as tech notes, reference documents, and other things to help you with your installation and success using SoundTraxx products. So there's a lot of great information, so please don't just dismiss it. Please use it, look at it. And like I said, if at the very least you use chapter 1 and read it, great. That way you're already ahead, because now you know what all the sounds are. So when you're setting CVs or reading through and trying to find this stuff, it'll make sense. The other topic I wanted to talk about today is when it comes to speakers. And we just did a YouTube video not long ago where I was pairing up 2 speakers together to build a speaker assembly. Now, on this particular locomotive here, that speaker assembly lives under the long hood. But there were some questions on there, both by email, on the video itself, asking about phase and stuff like that. So in this particular case, when you look at two speakers, you have your positives on one side and your negatives on the other side. So when you're wiring speakers in series, you're taking the positive on one here to the decoder, then you're taking the negative side to the positive side of the second speaker, and then the negative side of the second speaker runs back to the decoder. So these are in series. And that way, when you're doing positive to negative that way, they're phased properly so that they move air together. Now, if they were wired backwards, for example, one would push forward, the other would push back, and that's what degrades the audio quality. Now, in one of those examples, I had actually wired the speaker or mounted the speakers end to end, and so I glued together or wired together these ends, and then the two speaker wires would go to the other side. It's the exact same scenarios if they were side by side, just end to end. So those are some things to take into mind. But part of the reason we're doing dual cube speakers, and I really want to stress this point, is because a lot of our decoders, for example, everything in the Blue NAMI, whether it's a 2200, the P&P, or the 21P, for HO models anyway, they all have a 2-watt amplifier. And wattage is basically the power output of the decoder, and in this case, the amplifier. And it shows how much power can be sent through the wire to the speakers. Now, our cube speakers are rated for 7/10 of a watt, which is 0.7 watts, with a 1 watt peak, which means it can handle up to 7 watts as a normal operations, no problem. But once you go and exceed that 7/10 to 1 watt, now you're above normal, but you haven't reached its peak, and the peak is 1 watt. Now let's connect it to, say, a P&P decoder with a 2-watt amplifier. Now the amplifier, you say, oh, I want to turn it up, and the volume now goes to full. You're pumping 2 watts of power to a speaker that can only handle 1 watt. So you're more than double its max. Something's going to damage. Whether it's the amplifier on the decoder, whether it's the speaker itself is overdriven and you burn out the voice coil in it, or both, unfortunately. This is a very common thing. And so, over the years, we have been accustomed to doing a single decoder with a single speaker, because even if we go back to our original Tsunami, the 1 watt rating was actually pretty generous. It was probably closer to around a half or 7/10 of a watt, but a 1 watt speaker was more than adequate. But when you hook up now, one of the biggest things that people had asked for was to make it louder. So we put a 2 watt amplifier on most of the decoders. And now with 2 watts, you have to be able to handle that power properly. Now, these models here I brought out because you can see a big discrepancy in size, for example. You can see that one model is much longer than the other. And in this particular case, with the decoder in a Decoder Buddy up here, you guys have seen this in a video I did in the past on our YouTube channel. For those of you listening in audio, this is the Santa Fe GP30, one of the old Broadway or the Proto 2000 series that came in the old blue box. And the other model I have in front of me here is an Intermountain Tier 4 Gevo. And the way these models are both designed, drastically different eras. The Santa Fe GP30 was built long before sound was anywhere near commonplace, let alone demanded. And in order to fit this in, we had to mill the frame down a little bit to where I can put room to put a Decoder Buddy and a 21-pin decoder in it, but then I put 2 cube speakers under the long hood. Now these 2 cube speakers are mounted side by side with the small little jumper piece of wire between the terminals, so that way it gives a nice compact but reliable sound that's able to emanate out of those. But when it comes to this Intermountain Tier 4, these models were designed in a time when sound is a lot more prevalent and everybody wants sound. And so the weight in this particular one and the frame and everything is actually quite a bit further down, and the motor actually is sunk down into the fuel tank area a little bit. So your drive lines are more linear from the motor to the gear towers, versus the Santa Fe here, where the motor or the fuel tank was just weight and the motor sat on top of it. So there's a lot of space that you have to manage. But in this particular Intermountain Tier 4, this whole top of the model is basically open. When you take the shell off, everything basically from the yellow stripe on the BNSF paint scheme here up is hollow and open. So you've got plenty of room to put in a Decoder Buddy and a current keeper, a 21-pin decoder, and 4 cube speakers. And 4 cube speakers are wired in what's called a series parallel configuration. And so what I did in this particular case was I took 2 speakers, wired them in series, and then took another 2 of our cube speakers and wired them in series. Then I took the pairs and paralleled them. Now, when you wire 2 speakers in series, this creates a 16 ohm load. And I forgot to mention this, but its 16 ohm load is much better on the decoder because the 16 ohm load, the amplifier is not working as hard because the way the speaker's handling that power coming to it. And then, of course, the 2 cubes being able to collectively handle that 2 watts means you shouldn't have any problems with your amplifier down the line. But when we do in this series parallel configuration, you've got 2 speakers wired in series, which is 16 ohms, parallel to another 16 ohms. When you wire in parallel, it creates basically half of the impedance, which is 8 ohms, which is again nominal, perfect for the speaker. But now or for the amplifier, I mean. But now you have 4 speakers working together to not only collectively handle that output from the decoder, but they're also able to collectively work together to create those low frequencies. Now, if you look at our spec sheets on these cube speakers that we offer, they actually list around 250 hertz because normally from about this distance, that's what you can hear. But the speaker itself is actually capable of reproducing 100 hertz, but only short distance. And so that's another good reason why you want to use these in multiples, because when the 2 speakers are working together to reproduce 100 hertz, now that has a little bit more power to travel against all the air interference, whether it be air conditioning or other noises from other locomotives, to travel all the way to the ear. And when you put 4 of them together, oh yeah, that note comes out a lot stronger than you ever did with even just 2 cubes, because all 4 of those speakers are working hard together. Now, if you think about this, years ago when we used to have headphones and you'd be listening to some, we'll say rock and roll or whatever with the deep bass, and you hear that bass drum just boom, boom, boom. But then you pull the speaker away from your ear and you hear nothing but tss, 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 tss. And that's kind of the difference between air pressure, because air pressure is what we hear as volume, and that air pressure has to be strong enough to travel through the air to get to our ears, because our eardrums interpret that air pressure as sound. But with these small speakers, the surface area is very small. It's only 15 by 12 millimeters, which doesn't give much air pressure, especially when you're doing this at low frequency. So what happens is you need to add those extra speakers to help enhance that low frequency, to help it travel to our ears. Now, if you were ambitious enough to put together 3 sets of cube speakers paralleled in 3 pairs of 6 speakers, basically. 3 sets of paired and all together working, oh man, that's going to sound fantastic. Problem is, in most HO models, we don't have the room for even that. This is one of the few instances where I've actually been able to get 4 speakers in, and this thing sounds fantastic. And if you guys want to hear this, I've done the videos with this particular model in the past, this Intermountain Tier 4, going back to the Tsunami 2 product line. I did a full setup and operation video on this model when I installed the Tsunami 21 pin, and I implemented all the different lighting features that I built into the model and showed you how to do that. Sound selections, volume settings, and even equalizer settings and so forth. And it was about an hour and 20-minute video. And yes, it's a little long, but if you want to know every detail on how I usually set up most of my models, you can go back and watch that video. And when I've upgraded this now to a Blue Nami, now of course I've had to go back and do all those same settings again. But the good news is that the Blue Nami 21 pin and the Tsunami 21 pin, both of them plug right into the 21 pin socket that I installed with the Decoder Buddy in this particular instance. So again, you've got the cube speaker or the 4 cube speakers, the Decoder Buddy, and a current keeper. This model is one of my favorites to run. Unfortunately, as you guys know on this podcast, I tend to operate 1978 Missouri Pacific, so I don't have as many opportunities to run this model, but I will tell you that this model sounds fantastic. So pay attention when you're looking at your speakers, because it'll save you a lot of problems down the line. I know it's easy to fit 1 cube speaker in a lot of installations, but try to avoid that at all possible. If you have to use a cube speaker, put 2 in there, because if you do put 1 of them in there, you can probably get away with it if you reduce the volume below a half, but you have to religiously remember that that's the case, because if you down the line, say 6 months, I forgot that this model only had 1 cube speaker in it, why is it so quiet? And you go in and turn it up, oh, that's better, and then something goes wrong. it's because you've set a booby trap for yourself for later on. So future you needs to remember that that model absolutely has to be below that half volume setting, or else you're going to set yourself up for damage. So it's better to put the proper speakers in there. Now, most of our other speakers, I know I talk about the cubes a lot, especially during this presentation, but the other speakers, like for example, our 16 by 35 oval is capable of handling 2 watts. Our 28 millimeter round speaker is able to handle 2 watts. So in those particular cases, you don't necessarily have to put 2, but as we talked about with those low frequencies, putting more than one speaker in there really does help make it sound better, especially when the speakers are working together. Because with our 7-band equalizer, you can go in and boost some of those lower frequencies with multiple speakers, and now they'll come out a lot stronger. So I know this is a lot of kind of technical information on this particular podcast. As far as models operating, one of the things I've actually been doing a lot of lately is spending more time working on my home layout. So I don't have a new model per se to show you here that I've been working on lately. I'll save that for the next podcast. But if you actually go to my personal YouTube channel, Goalie George, on YouTube, just one word, I'm actually posting a update video this week as of recording this, so you should be able to see it by the time this podcast is released. But it'll give you a episode where I'm showing you just kind of tour of the layout. I've been spending a lot more time on lights. I know that shocks a lot of you that I would be working on lights, but I've been adding a bunch of lights to my layout, getting things lit up, so for night operations, we're not in the dark. Sorry, I couldn't resist. I had to do it. But anyway, with a lot of that, you can see the updates. And I'll give you a couple of clips here of a run-by I did recently. For those of you watching on video, you'll be able to see this, that I ran an op session not too long ago. I actually ran trains at my home layout. I was so excited. I turned off the phone, threw it away, or put it in the other room, and just went out in the garage, turned on the smoker, and ran trains for the day. So it was a lot of fun. But I didn't record it, just this one little run by. So anyway, I know this is a lot of information for you guys, and so I always want to tell you that we are partners in this. We do want to help make sure you enjoy your model trains, and especially with SoundTraxx products, we want to make sure you're successful with all of your installations. So if you do have any questions, feel free to contact us at support@soundtraxx.com, and we will be happy to help answer any questions and walk you through it. Even if you're new to the hobby, hey, we all had to learn somewhere. And so we're going to help you along that journey by teaching you the proper ways of doing installations and the proper ways of managing the speaker powers and amplifier power with your speakers, so that way you can be successful the first time and getting that confidence to go out and do the second one. So that's everything I've got planned for this one. This particular podcast is going to be short. I don't know where I'm at right now as far as time. So hopefully this has been entertaining and informative. Like I said, please reach out to us. Leave a comment in the section below if you have any questions, thoughts, want to add anything to this. We're always willing to listen and talk and have a conversation with you. And then, of course, support at SoundTraxx.com. We'll be able to have any questions answered for you as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off this episode of the podcast. This has been Train Talk from Milepost 141. This is the SoundTraxx Sound Bites podcast, coming to you from 141 Burnett Drive in Durango, Colorado. And if any of you guys come out and you want to ride the train, contact us. Let us know. If it's available, we'd be happy to show you around. We do tours where we want to show you our facility because we actually do manufacture our stuff here, and we're pretty proud of that. So with that, I'll sign off. I think that's all I've got. So we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.